Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have a very big treat for you. We have Marcie Colleen here to talk about her book review. I'm going to go ahead and let her take it away. Make sure that if you'd like to get a book and a signed book plate, we've got the order link above the video. And if you have any questions for her, make sure that you put them in the comment section. She's going to be answering them at the end of her discussion. So yeah, enjoy. Have a good event, guys.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much, Mysterious Galaxy, for continuing to do events for those of us who had them scheduled. I was literally supposed to be at the store today at 2 p.m. exactly now, doing an event, but through the power of technology, here we are. So my name is Marcie Colleen, and I write children's books. I have a couple of the books here. One is Love Triangle, which is a book about a circle and a square who are best friends until a triangle shows up, and then they both decide they might rather be best friends with the triangle. That is illustrated by Bob Shea and published by HarperCollins. I believe they have copies of all of these books at Mysterious Galaxy. I also have Penguinaut, which is my book about a plucky little zoo penguin who wants to go on big adventures just like his big friends. And so he sets his sights on an adventure to the moon. This book is illustrated by Emma Yarlett and published by Scholastic. For those of you who have a little bit older readers, I have a chapter book series called The Super Happy Party Bears, which is an 8-book series about bears who love to sing and dance and party all the time and only eat donuts, but they live in a place called the Grumpy Woods where no one wants them to do any of those things. And a bunch of these books are also at Mysterious Galaxy, and they're full color illustrations all the way through. And that's a chapter book series for about ages 5 to 10. But today, I'm going to share with you my absolute newest book, which just came out in March. And it was just featured actually last Sunday in the San Diego Union Tribune in a whole full page article and interview with me. It's called The Bear's Garden. Now, this book is near and dear to my heart because it is based somewhat on a true story. Before moving to San Diego, California, I lived in Brooklyn, New York. I'm from New York. And in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, there were several community gardens. I know there are several community gardens in this area as well. Maybe you have one near you. I have one not far from me in my neighborhood here in Bankers Hill. And the one garden that always caught my eye in my neighborhood in Brooklyn was one that was called the Pacific Street Brooklyn Bears Community Garden. And I thought, why in the world is it called the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden? I mean, the last I knew, there were no bears living in Brooklyn. They weren't roaming around on the streets. Like, where exactly did this name come from? And when you're a writer and you get these thoughts in your head, you investigate, you research, you try to figure out what's the true story here. And when I did some research, I learned that that garden was called the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden because when the workers first started working in that abandoned lot to make it into a garden, they found a stuffed teddy bear in the weeds. Now, this is a picture that was in the newspaper in Brooklyn of the teddy bear in the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden. And I'm going to bring you back to that picture at the very end. But I decided nobody knows how the bear got into the weeds or why the bear was in the weeds. Maybe the bear went there by himself. Who knows? But I decided to write my own fantastical story inspired by the garden about how the bear maybe came to be in the weeds that day. And that is The Bear's Garden. The Bear's Garden is illustrated by Alison Oliver and published by Macmillan. I want to share with you, there's some really special bells and whistles with the production of this book. We have some shiny lettering on the front and some spot gloss, but something else that always makes me so happy is that, you know how most picture books have these pesky little jackets on them, the some fall off and rip and whatnot. Well, sometimes publishers will put special hidden pictures underneath the jacket. Can you believe that? And right onto the case cover of the hardcover book. And they did that with the Bear's Garden. I want to show you exactly what it looks like. So here's the jacket. And now we're going to reveal what's underneath. Isn't that cool? That is really cool. So I'm going to read to you now The Bear's Garden. It starts out with these really great end papers that have a map of New York City. And if you look down here, there is the Bear's Garden in Brooklyn. I lived right about here is where I lived. We zoom in a little closer. In the big bustling city, all the people were busy. They rushed up and down the street without seeing that some buildings needed paint, that some buildings were empty, that some buildings were gone. This great aerial shot. It's like we're on the roofs looking straight down on the street. And right here is the bear's house. But in one girl's imagination, the city was a place to grow, a place to play, a place to love. She could always find beauty around her. Now we have a wordless spread here, so I want to share with you what happens. So here she is in her window, and she's got a little tomato can, and she has planted a tiny seedling in there, a little tiny plant. Maybe you can see a little bit of green in there. So she puts it on her windowsill to get it plenty of fresh air and sun, and then she places her bear there to look over it. There's the bear looking over the seedling. And then, oh no, what's coming here? Can you see what that is? Oh, it's a pigeon. Pigeons sometimes cause some trouble, some mayhem. They're mischievous. And look, the pigeon knocked that little seedling right off the windowsill. One night, the girl's imagination spilled onto the sidewalk, rolled across the street, and sprouted. There she is, looking across the street like, where did my seedling go? Where did it roll to? Maybe this little black cat knows something about that. A baby garden. When she spotted the seedling, she introduced herself with a how do you do and a garden party. And that's how it went. Day after day, no matter how fierce the sun or how swift the wind, the little girl watched over the seedling. I believe in you, she whispered every morning and every night. More seedlings soon grew. People rushing by began to slow down. First with a tip of the hat or a nod of the head, people stopped to smile or say hello to the little girl with the tiny green friends. There came a time when the little girl had to leave for a while. Without her care and without her love, she knew the plants would wither. You know, when we leave our house and we go like on vacation or something, a lot of times we ask somebody to take care of our pets and our plants for us because they are living things and they need some extra care even if we're not there. And the little girl is a little worried that if she leaves, nobody's going to take care of the garden and the lot. She wanted to bring the garden with her, but it wasn't possible. Here she is trying to shovel all of the garden into a suitcase. Oh, how silly. You can't put a whole garden in a suitcase, could you? I don't think so. She thought maybe she could whisper, "I believe in you," from far away, but she didn't have enough string. Oh, she has a tin can telephone there, but the string's not long enough for where she's going. She tried employing a pigeon, but it was clearly not trained. There she is giving a special instructions to the pigeon, and the pigeon just drops it and moves on to its other pigeon friends. It's hard to train a pigeon sometimes in the city. If the little girl could not take care of the garden, someone else would have to. Who do you think she's going to ask? Anybody have any ideas? She filled her bear with cuddles and snuggles and stuffed him full of hope. Oh, there she is, making sure that that bear has a lot of love in him. She locked button eyes with him and whispered into his ear, "This is a very special mission. Watch the garden until I get back." She kissed him on top of his head and left him to do his job. From miles away, the girl imagined the garden was blooming. She imagined it could be a place to grow. It seems like there are other neighbors who are bringing plants to come and add to the garden. A place to play. So many more people coming to play ball and play hopscotch and to plant. And here they're taking down all of this ugly paneled wood paneling that served as a temporary fence, and they're putting up this beautiful wrought iron fence. A place to love, and it was. There she is, reunited with her teddy bear and her mom. Do you remember those end papers at the beginning where they had the map of New York City? Well, look now. See all the gardens popping up? And I also want to bring your attention to, at the very end of the book, I have a little author's note that talks about the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden and where the inspiration came from for this story. But right here, there's a picture of the bear. You remember that picture? It's the same picture. And I have a friend here with me. This is my bear, Brooklyn. Fitting name, right? And so Brooklyn was actually a gift for me from Macmillan, my publishers, when the book came out in March. I see that there are some questions coming in because that's the end of the book. Thank you so much for allowing me to share that with you, and I would love to take questions now. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those in on Facebook and I'll answer them. So the first question says, "This story is so cute and perfectly matched by the illustrations. What was the illustration process like?" Well, interesting that you should bring that up. In the children's book world, with picture books, which The Bear's Garden is a picture book, it's illustrated all the way through. There's a very interesting process. I am not the illustrator. I only write the story. And so when I sell a book to a publishing house like Macmillan, who purchased The Bear's Garden, it is then their job to find an illustrator to bring the story to life. This book is illustrated by a woman named Alison Oliver. You might know her if any of you have any of the baby lit board books, which are the books like Jane Eyre for babies and Moby Dick for babies and Pride and Prejudice for babies. She illustrates all of those, and she has some of her own illustration projects as well. But what was really helpful about having Alison on this book project is that Alison also lives in my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. So she is well aware of the area. She knows the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden. Her boyfriend actually works with the green markets of New York City. And, you know, I look at an illustration like this. Let me see if I can find it for you. I look at an illustration like this. And this to me looks so much like my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And so to have somebody who is so close to the area be able to bring it to life is a real pleasure. And if you get a chance to look through this book in a hard copy, what you'll notice that is so awesome is that, you know, the color gets brighter and brighter as the story goes on until you get to that end where it's nice and bright and colorful. Alison did an amazing job. We love the bear. Did you have a special stuffed animal when you were younger? Oh, I had a lot of special stuffed animals when I was younger. In fact, I have quite a few now still. But my favorite, it might be a little odd, but my favorite stuffed animal was a gingerbread man stuffed animal named Gingy, who I bought at a church rummage sale. He was probably supposed to be a Christmas toy, and he came home with me, and he spent several years going absolutely everywhere with me. I don't have him right here with me. He's back in my bedroom, but recently my mother found him in the toy box in my home, my childhood home, and reunited me with Gingy. I believe in the power of stuffed animals. I feel like they're an essential part of existence. And I love the fact that I finally have a book that talks about that special relationship between a child and a stuffed animal. Which page is your favorite? Oh, that's a good question. Let me look quickly through the book and see if I can show you what my favorite illustration is. I'm pretty sure that my favorite is this spread here. And I'll tell you why I think it's my favorite. I think it's my favorite because it feels very much like Brooklyn to me. It also has a reminiscent feel to the work of like Ezra Jack Keats, who did The Snowy Day and a lot of other books that took place in New York City. And when you're the writer of a picture book, your writing, your manuscript, your story is sent to the illustrator, and then the illustrator uses their skills to bring the story to life. And I love when the illustrator brings something special to the story. This was not a moment that was in my manuscript where we watched the little girl put the plant on the windowsill. Here she is in her pajamas getting ready for bed. Then she leaves, you know, she goes for the night and she goes to sleep and she leaves her little bear here. And then this pigeon comes and knocks it off. And then the story continues. But I love the fact that she brought that to the story all by herself to kind of enhance my story and make it even better. So to me, making a picture book is very much a collaboration. It's a collaborative art. It's a lot of people who are very talented working together. The story starts with an idea in my head and I write it down, but then I have an agent who helps me make it stronger and then sells it to a publishing house. Then I have an editor at the publishing house who helps me make it even better. And then an illustrator who comes in with an art director and tries to make the illustrations as wonderful as possible. And so it's a full collaboration. And that spread to me feels very much like a collaboration and makes it feel like it's a shared piece of art for all of us. The next question is, did the original bear ever have a name, or did anyone ever claim him? I actually have been in touch very closely with the people who started the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden. And they did have the bear for a while. Unfortunately, the bear was outside in the elements of Brooklyn for quite a long time, and it probably kind of started to deteriorate a bit, and it was kind of gross. And so they don't have the bear anymore. They have pictures of the bear, but they never found out how the bear got there, which to me adds to the mystery and adds to the feelings that I had around wanting to write a story about it that comes very much from a kid. For some reason, I feel like if we knew the true story now, it would kind of diminish the whole feel around the Brooklyn Bears Community Garden. I've been lucky that the Bears Garden has embraced this book so much, and they love it, and they've been sharing it with their gardeners and their community. I was supposed to be in New York last month doing several stops on a book tour, including a stop at the garden. The garden is celebrating 35 years this year. And I was supposed to be there celebrating with them. Hopefully that is just delayed and will happen at a later date. But yeah, we don't know. But here's my version of maybe where that bear came from. Next question, how did you begin writing books? I just had a school visit to a school in Queens, New York yesterday with a bunch of kids. And kids always ask, when did you write your first book? And the boring answer, the answer that kids don't really want to hear, is that I first started writing when I was about 38. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything to kids. But I will tell you that I have always been a writer. In fact, I have books that I have read or that I've written that are from back when I was in about first or second grade, when I would spend lots of time in my bedroom at home alone, having to entertain myself. A lot of times I wrote poems, I wrote stories, I wrote comics, I wrote plays, I wrote song lyrics. I wrote a lot when I was a kid. And luckily, I also kind of saved a lot of that stuff. So I have a lot of it now. But the reason why I kind of started writing in the first place is that I love books and I love stories. So many of you probably do too. And my feeling about that is when you start to read a lot of books like I did as a kid, I'd have the huge stacks that I would take home from the library. And a lot of times what would happen is it would make other stories go on in my head. I would start to think of stories. And then I started thinking, well, these people can write books. I wonder if I can write books too. It's kind of like if you're really into a sport or something and you've been watching baseball a lot. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I bet I could play baseball too. Well, it's the same thing about writing. I would read other people's stories and then suddenly think, you know what? I bet I could write stories too. And you can. And it just takes a lot of practice. And so I wrote a lot and I continued to be a writer throughout my life. I had many different careers. I was a high school teacher for a while. I was an actress for a while. I was a nanny. I was a teacher. I've done a lot of different things. But then it was when I was about 10 years ago, I started thinking about what was the next thing in my life. And I decided to begin writing books. And I was drawn to children's books. And that's when I first started writing with the hopes of becoming a published author. Have any of your stories from when you were a kid become books? Well, Not in published form, no. I have one book. It's called Rainbow Hunt, and it is about a bunch of kids who see a rainbow and then it disappears, and they go, looking through their neighborhood to try to see if they can find where the rainbow disappeared to. I actually made that into an illustrated book when I was a kid, and I made a cover for it and a title page and about the author page. And I share that when I go to school visits. I share the entire book with the kids. So that's about what my publication process was when I was a kid. My first published books that came out were actually the Super Happy Party Bears chapter book series. How long was the process from your first thought to publication of this story? Well, usually it takes about, and this is going to sound really kind of disheartening for some people, but the process does take a while. I know the stories are very, very short. They're only about 300 to 500 words, but it usually takes me anywhere from a year to 2 years to write a story that is worthy of being published by a publishing house. In fact, the book that I talk about a lot with this timeline is Penguinaut. This book I started writing in January of 2012, and I worked on it about 39 different versions of it until in September 2014. So 2.5 years later, Scholastic actually purchased it, and then it didn't come out until 4 years later after that, because it takes a while to get the illustrations and find a spot in the market for the book. So it does take a while. For this one, I think it took me a couple of years to write the book and review it and revise it and make it the best that it possibly could be. And then it sold to Macmillan, I believe, in early 2018. And then the publishing house starts working on it, the illustrator starts working on it, and it just came out about exactly 2 years later in March 2020. So it did take about 3 years from the time that I started writing it, from my idea to the time that it became a book that you can purchase at Mysterious Galaxy. But I will say that 2 to 3 years is average for a book to be published, but sometimes I get ideas in my head that I also let marinate for about a year before I even sit down to write it at all. It's kind of have to wait for the right moment to write the book. So it's not a precise timeline, but that's about average. About if I wrote something today and sold it to a publishing house tomorrow, it would probably be on the bookshelves in about 2 or 3 years. What was your favorite book as a kid? I have a couple that are picture books. One, I absolutely adore the Curious George series. My favorite moment in Curious George, I believe it was the one called Curious George Takes a Job. And it's the one where at the end, they have made a famous film about Curious George. And at the very end of the book, there's the premiere of the movie, and you see all of the people in the illustrations all sitting in the chairs that he had met along the way in the course of the book. I loved that. I loved poring over that moment in that book as a kid. And there have been plenty of times in my life where, something big has happened and people from all over in different parts of my life have come together to celebrate. And I call those my Curious George moments, because that very much feels like that last spread that had such an impact on me when I was a kid. I also was a huge fan of Bread and Jam for Francis by Russell Hoban and Lillian Hoban. I loved the fact that Frances sang to her food. I thought that was really, really funny. I especially loved the song that she sings to her poached egg. And then I also was a huge fan of Caps for Sale by Esper Sloblakina, which is the story of a peddler who is selling a bunch of hats, and he comes upon a group of monkeys that makes his job very silly. So those were my favorite picture books when I was a kid. What are you currently working on / future projects? My next picture book comes out next year. It will come out in August 2021. It is a nonfiction book. This is the first time that I've written a nonfiction book. This is also a picture book, but it is based on the true story of the September 11th survivor tree, which was a calorie, or is a calorie pear tree that was found in the rubble of the World Trade Center the month after the tragedy, and it was brought out and rehabilitated, and now it is back down at the memorial. And so I have told that story in picture book form. It is illustrated by Caldecott Honor winner Aaron Becker of the Journey series. And I'm really excited for that book to come out. And then I'm working on lots of other projects, including a graphic novel series that would be for about the same age group as the Super Happy Party Bears that I'm hoping sells really, really soon. So I think that's it for questions. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to go to my website, this is marciecolleen.com. I don't know if you're seeing that backwards or not, but this is marciecolleen.com. You can go to my website. You can see all my book information there. If you are interested in purchasing a copy of any of my books, or The Bear's Garden, any of them, please do that through Mysterious Galaxy. Let's support our local indie bookstores. And I'd be happy to sign those books for you, personally sign them with your name. I also have some stickers or some coloring pages that I can throw in there too, based on whatever book that you get. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, guys. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday and keep on reading.